Hello, and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, we're glad to have you back. You heard the beginning and the intro of the show. My name is Steve Green. I'm your host, and it is my pleasure to be here with you and to have you here with us. Today, our guest, well, we're taking a little different approach to what we love to talk about, which is the fire service. We've had, over these 6.5 years, we've had wonderful guests on talking about the fire service. But today we actually have our first fire buff on the show. And fire buffs, I would say for the most part, and my friend here will extrapolate on that, but for the most part, fire buffs aren't firefighters themselves. But fire buffs are people who in their communities love to watch the fire service in action. Oftentimes they will even help. They'll bring cold drinks. They will bring warm drinks, whatever they can do to help support the firefighters that they feel this connection to. And so my guest today is Andrew Cunningham. He is from Wheeling, West Virginia area. In 1999, he discovered his passion for fire buffing. Even after 24 years, he remains an active fire buff in his community. He has established a local group of fire buffs who document the activities of the city's fire department by filming apparatus, responding to calls, and showing up at fire scenes. Actually, I got to interrupt there for a moment because before he and I were ever in contact, I had seen what I thought were referred photos from Wheeling that may have come from your group because I saw them on Instagram. So
Yeah.
So I assume that, somebody put them there, liked what they saw, and decided to add them there. Andrew holds a master's degree in multimedia arts from Duquesne University and has utilized his media expertise to spotlight firefighters. Additionally, Andrew manages all the social media for Wheeling Fire Buffs and initiated the first Fire Buff Association Facebook group in the metropolitan Wheeling, West Virginia area, the Ohio Valley Fire Buff Association group on Facebook. Andrew, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. We've talked several times. We've also been in contact through phone and through email. And I think that when you first reached out to me, and you told me what you were doing, I really was interested because I guess before I even became a firefighter, I was a fire buff. It started when I was a young child, and I loved seeing the rotating beacon lights on that old federal rotating beacon. And every place I go with my parents, didn't matter what color it was, red, blue, yellow, green, I would be yelling out in the backseat, beacon, 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 beacon. And when I was 7 years old, I met my first firefighter. We had a small woods fire behind our home. Wasn't anything major. The engine from the nearest station to our home showed up, and this was way back in the late 1950s. And while everybody else went up to the woods to watch the firefighters put out the fire, I walked down to the apparatus, the engine, and the engineer was there, and he gave me a lollipop and showed me the fire truck and the pump and where the hoses were and everything like that. And from that moment on, I really admired firefighters because he was so nice to me. That was the only thing I would think. And as I kind of grew into it, I asked or cajoled or forced my parents to drive me around our town, what was a town back then, and take me to all the 5 stations that we had so I could visit them. Then when I started riding my bike, I was riding my bike to those stations and other stations within about a 10-mile radius. And then when I had my license, I was driving all over Greater Boston, visiting firehouses. So, and I had never an intention to be a firefighter. Life sometimes just takes us down strange paths that we didn't necessarily choose, but that's the way life said, here's your next assignment, and this is what you're going to do. And subsequently, that path took me to North Carolina, where I wound up joining the first volunteer fire department that I was a member of. And it's funny because I only pulled into that station, its back apron, because the rear doors were up, and I saw red shiny vehicles inside. So they were right across the street. The station was right across the street from a small grocery market. We had just moved into town. And I was going there to get some groceries, and I said, "Well, I'll just pull in here first. Nice big red shiny trucks. I'll go inside." And 35 minutes later, I walked out with an application in my hand. But that wasn't the purpose of going in. It was just to see the apparatus. I always loved looking at the apparatus. And so I guess I have the Buffin blood in me. And I was just one of those people who was lucky enough to, by chance, uh, turn it into a passion itself, the next level of that passion. So, what brought you initially to becoming a fire buff?
Well, initially, I caught a fire in my neighborhood. There was a fire when I was 17 years old. I remember coming home from high school, and I turned into my street, and I could see Ladder One. I could see an engine company all parked on the street, and I could see smoke up the hill. And I grabbed the camera, and I thought it'd be an opportunity to practice my artistic eye taking photos. I grabbed one of the neighbors when we ran up the street, and there were a lot more trucks than just those two trucks. And there was a full-fledged house fire with, I think, pet rescues at the time. And it was my first fire in October of 1999. I got a lot of nice apparatus photos. And I decided to investigate the firehouse that was 3 blocks down the street from my house. I always knew it was in the neighborhood because when I was a little kid, like you were talking about, hearing the fire truck go by, we'd hear it go by the house all the time. Engine 10 would always respond down Edgewood Street, and you could hear that engine almost turn out from the station with its diesel engine. And I walked down to the firehouse and met the firefighters, and they just started showing me the apparatus and started teaching me about the job, and said I could come around anytime I wanted to learn about the fire service. And my uncle was a volunteer in Ohio County for a number of years in college and after college, and his best friend was also a volunteer. His best friend's son became my best friend, and he when he grew up, he joined the Wheeling Fire Department, and then he joined another fire department in Ohio later, and that's where he is now. And he's a buff to this day too. And when I was a young man, he's the guy that took me under his wing and started showing me, when you come onto a fire scene, look for this and look for that, and frame the shot this way or that way. And it just became like a little hobby that turned into something that became really really awesome.
Well, especially, since you got your master's degree in multimedia arts. So the fact that we know now in today's time that these kind of photos and videos really hold a lot more than just some kid snapping a picture of a fire engine. In your case, that it really was what prompted you to go into this. And I think probably I would have to say it would be a rare firefighter who may be on vacation or in another community or taking a class, and if they hear the apparatus going by, would not take notice of it and maybe see if it was in the area and looking for it. So I think a lot of firefighters in their heart, because of who we are and what we do, can understand the passion that fire buffs have, because we have that passion that firefighters have and that the buffs have, I think, are very, very, very close to each other. A lot of it deals with admiration, because that's how mine started. That's how yours just started, as you explained. And you look on social media posts, and lots of firefighters on the main ones I'm on, which Twitter and Instagram, LinkedIn, react to posts of new apparatus or apparatus on the scene of a working situation, and we like to look at those. So I think at, in our heart of hearts, firefighters, career, volunteer, WUI makes no difference. I think we're all kind of buffs with what we do and what we enjoy to see. We like to see pictures of new apparatus, for example. I know that ever since I've been reading Firehouse Magazine, which started in '77, one of the first things I turn to is to see new apparatus photos. Now, of course, they're doing them more online on the website. But boy, I used to look and read, even if I didn't understand how a pump worked in those early days, I still loved looking at the apparatus. So there's no doubt that I've always had that same passion, I guess, that you share. So what do you see? That you just explained your personal introduction, so to speak, into buffing, but you've spoken with buffs not only in your area but all across the country. What do you see as the basis and the view that most buffs hold that brought them to this hobby? And for some of them, it's actually a job because they've been able to turn their photos into pictures, into newspapers, and if they use video, they turn them into news stations and stuff. But there's got to be a passion. Yes, oftentimes they get paid for it, but let's take that part of it away, because just to do it in general, you have to have something in your heart before you get something in your wallet.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's really, like, in my opinion, there's two distinctions between buffs in general. There's buffs that have the passion and want to do it for the kind of artistic kind of like pride, and value type way. And then there's kind of like stringers and people that want to be like news broadcasters. And I don't agree so much with that, because it gets into kind of dicey areas where, like, for instance, I won't mention which group it was, but there's a group that was a buff group that has a Facebook post, and they'd post news stories of all the fires in the area. And it just felt for the community, for somebody else watching that wouldn't have the passion or the knowledge of the fire service like a firefighter would. It felt like it was a little like privacy infringing, and I don't want to be anything in the news broadcasting. I mean, the whole idea is that I'm passionate about the fire service, the firefighters, and I think in general most buffs want to capture like those beautiful fire trucks responding, or capture the history of the firefighters doing their job. There's something to be seen, as you know, that there's something to be seen on a fire scene, and it's a moment, it's a slice of history. And my opinion is, if I can capture it, or my buffs can capture it, we can look, 30, 40, 50 years down the line and have 5 generations of Wheeling firefighters looking back and saying, this is when I was a probie, or this was my great grandfather. And it's history to me. That's what motivates me more than anything, is the history and the appreciation of the service that the men and women do. I'm proud of my Wheeling firefighters, and that's one of the only main reasons that I've continued on for over 20 years, is just because it's community pride. I'm proud of my town. I'm proud of men and women, taking up arms and taking care of us. That's what they're doing.
Right. You mentioned something about stringers when I think I'm glad you did, because a lot of people don't know what stringers are. And stringers, for the most part, are, well, initially when we started our work with our first television show that we tried to work to call America's Heroes, the Men and Women of Fire Rescue, we actually notified stringers across the country that we were looking for footage for stories that we could do on our show. And then we would work with that stringer after, if we liked the video they sent to us, we would then work with that stringer to to notify us. We get it. We'd look them over, because then we would often go back, and if it was too far for us to travel, or I shouldn't say too far, too expensive for us to travel, then we'd have the stringer go and then interview after the fact a couple of firefighters that were involved in the scene, or the battalion chief or the incident commander, and then we would use that. We would use that in the video as well. If it was more local to where we were in the Northeast and Southeast of the country, then we would go on our own to do those interviews. So they have their available, and a lot of stringers also from that within several years, and this is the late 90s for us, then stringers we're starting to shoot to submit their video to news stations, local, regional, and national. So we had a couple stringers in LA who got great stuff, and Denver and Chicago, New Orleans. So we were getting stuff for our program, the show that we were trying to produce. We didn't pay stringers at that time, and we put that in the agreement, and we didn't have a problem with any one of them. But we got some great videos of various responses, various calls, the good calls, the bad calls. We also were very, very careful to maintain people's privacy in it. And we told the stringers that that's very important to us. So we don't want to see you shooting, God forbid, a body that wasn't covered up yet or anything like that. That's not what we're interested in. We want to show and support firefighters. That's what this is about, and tell the stories. So I think you brought up a good point in that stringers today, especially, are often in there to sell it and make money off it. However, we also have to remember that back when I was talking about stringers, it was only the people with decent cameras that would shoot it. Now everybody is a reporter. Everybody has a camera on their phone, and everybody shoots this and wants to be the first one to get it to the local news station. To me, that's not being a buff.
That's right.
I don't define that as being a buff. You want to take pictures of fire scenes to make money. All right, so be a paid photographer. That's what you're going to be, or videographer. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But a buff isn't doing it for the money. The buff is doing it for the honor and the privilege.
That's right.
Because you mentioned that you have a good, from that first time you visited that station, you have a good rapport with your firefighters.
That's
so
right.
they're when you're on the scene, they're happy to see you. They know what you're doing, they know your work, and they know that you're going to put them in the best light possible. And you're not out there trying to make a fast buck on a slip and fall or anything like that. And I think that's an important difference that our listeners and viewers have to understand, that buffs do it for the love and passion of the fire service. I say for the most part. I can't say 100%. Neither one of us can. But I would say for the most part that buffs do it because of that love and passion. Whereas those who are stringers and those who take the pictures and want us, that's their business. That's fine. I have no problem with it. But I just think that it's important to delineate that the buffs do it out of their love for the fire service in their community. And that's very important. And fire buffs, for the most part, will not interfere.
That's right.
Right?
And that's something that I preach at my organization is we're not there to be firefighters, because we're not firefighters. We're civilians. We're there to document safely, as safe as possible. So whenever we get a call we generally respond to structure fires. And when we get a structure fire call, we've got many ears listening in, and primarily we're listening for scene safety and things. If there's going to be like a gas leak or an ammonia leak or something hazmat or something that's going to affect the scene and affect the firefighters just beyond a regular house fire, we don't send buffs. We don't go, because it's a dangerous situation. We don't need to be there to get injured just to capture a passion. There's And I think a lot of buffs that I've seen, buff groups, um, would just go to the fire and not care, like. But I think the buffs that are successful on YouTube, the ones that capture, and especially in New York City, there's several fire buffs in New York City that go to the major calls in Manhattan, the big high rise structure fires, and they have a good rapport with the FDNY, and they walk right up on scene, and they stay safe, and safety is number one. I read a very good article by a firefighter. Runs a magazine. I believe it's called Firefighter Now, and it was an article about fire buffs in general. And his basic opinion, being a firefighter, was that it's very dangerous for on a fire scene for anyone other than firefighters to be there.
Very true.
So there's always that. I mean, no job is worth capturing to risk the buff safety or the safety of the firefighters having to. If a buff goes down on scene, now we have to they have to treat the buff instead of fighting the fire, and now we're in the way.
Right.
And there's and on the scene with hoses and the way hoses go, if there's an uncharged hose and you're standing over it and they're going to charge it, you're going to get your leg, you're going to fall on the ground, and there's wires. There's constantly like power company showing up, and wires could be down, and there could be a backdraft explosion that the buff doesn't know about, that the fireman might be aware about. I saw a video yesterday where there was a backdraft house explosion, or it was a flashover, and it blew the front of the house
Yeah,
out.
that was Wantagh, Long Island. Yeah, I saw that yesterday as well. Yeah, I saw.
And there was
I think Chief Billy Goldfeder actually posted the first part of the fire, showing them just arriving on scene, the first part of the video. And then yesterday, I saw that second part from Chief Billy Goldfeder, where you had that scene that you just talked about. There was some sort of either smoke explosion or backdraft that blew out that whole A side of the house.
Yeah. The thing that I noticed about it was there was a young kid on scene in a T-shirt holding a camera, and he looked at the camera and made a reaction to what he just saw. He was, and I was thinking, is he a buff, or is he just a guy standing there filming
with his cell phone, right?
Yeah, and if he was a buff, he wouldn't, in my group, my buffs don't just show up in a T-shirt and flip-flops with a cell phone. You have to dress appropriately to be on a fire scene. Boots, I always wear like this hoodie. This is my YouTube people can see it, but the audio audience just can't. But it's got my logo on it, and on the back it says my organization, just to denote that I'm not a firefighter, but so the police know walking up, I'm not also just a passerby that's approaching the scene with a camera bag and a scanner. But right. It's a very dangerous thing, and that Firefighter Now guy brought up that point, and made me kind of think that it's a very dangerous. It can be a very dangerous thing to be a fire buff.
Oh, sure, and I think that's a very important point that we need to stress, is that the first thing, if you have this interest, the first thing you have to, number one, is look out for your own safety, and look out for the safety of those who are going to be working at that scene. Number one. Number two, you can't get in the way.
That's right.
Not even for the best picture that would get you the Pulitzer Prize, you can't get in the way, because you do, and someone has to, even if it's one firefighter, have to deal with you, then you could be taking their attention away from something much, much more important, where they should be focusing on, instead of just, I want to get close, I want to get a good picture, I want to get close. That's not what buffs do. I think it's important to understand that buffs don't get in the way. Most buffs, they don't want to interfere. They're looking for great pictures that will show the public, when they're posted, how good those firefighters and that fire department is. And that's really what's at their heart. is to do that because they admire the men and women who serve in the fire service, whether it's Wheeling or it's LA or it's Spokane or it's Bangor, Maine, wherever you are, there are fire departments and there are people who either are career and get paid to be there or volunteers or part pay. We have our wonderful WUI people as well. But the fact is, I don't care how important the picture is, you can't get in the way. You have to be professional enough in what you're looking to do as a fire buff to know that that's rule number one. You cannot get in the way. And it's very, very important to remember that. Now, something else that I like about certain buff groups, and Andrew, you can tell us a little bit more, is that oftentimes buffs also sometimes work as support people. In other words, they will bring cold drinks or a case of water or snacks or something for when firefighters are taking a break and doing quick rehab. They get some, good drink, either again water, Gatorade, vitamin water, anything like that. But you do more than just take pictures. You also, a lot of buff organizations also want to try to help that fire department without getting in the way.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of auxiliary groups that are buff groups. I believe it's the International Association of Fire Buffs. The IAFB is the organization that joins all these second alarmers and box associations in big cities that show up at 3-alarm fires with hot meals and hot coffee for the fire service. In my city, the rehab is done by the fire department, so the fire department has hot coffee and cold drinks for itself. So I've never done that. I think if I think back in my over 20-year career of being a buff on scene, there might have been one fire where there was the need for me to help a firefighter carry the hot coffee to the fireman from the truck. But I've never, the fire department does its own dispensing in Wheeling. But there are buff groups that do support in that way. And let me just bring up one more point on your don't get in the way
Sure.
point. It's very important that, in my opinion, that fire buffs don't participate and think in the moment, think, oh, I can grab this line and help them stretch it. Don't do that. You're not a firefighter. I mean, even if you are a firefighter, and this is my opinion, Steve, but if the buff's a firefighter, let's say that I were a firefighter in another city and I'm buffing another city, I don't show up at that city and help out just because I have training. That doesn't make any sense. So a buff that has no training, or even if the buff has some training, if you're there as a buff, you're not there to stretch lines and get in the and that's getting in the way. If or help someone take a hydrant if they're short staffed, that's a no-no. That's a big no-no in my opinion. That's not the kind of help that a buff should offer on scene.
No, it's also and that's a very good point. But we also have to remember that there are times, especially today, when we're so shorthanded in the fire service, especially in the volunteer sector, that there are times when the department gets on the scene short-staffed. Maybe it's only a two-person response on an engine company, and those two people have to set up a water feed. They have to pull hose. They have to start fast water, get water on the fire as quickly as possible. And sometimes in that community, they know that there are citizens who will come and help them out. They're not trained firefighters, not even volunteers, but they will help them out in a way if a firefighter calls them over and say, hey, can you help me pull this line, get it off the back of the engine cover? That's different than you just jumping in and say, well, I'm going to pull a line off the truck because I see a spot fire over there. You can't do that. You have to know your limits. And you know what? Those limits are good both for you, because they'll keep you safer, and it's good for the fire service. So nothing happens to the firefighters who are on the scene working that call and having to take their attention away from the call to deal with somebody who wants to play firefighter. And that
That's right.
is problematic. And I think, and I thank you for underscoring that point, because we have to know that there is a line between buffing and interference.
That's right.
So,
Steve,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that at my group, what I do is I preach that my buffs, our tools are our cameras and our scanners, and our tools, aren't anything on the fire scene. The firemen have the scenes they're seeing. We're guests on their scene. They're allowing us to be there, as long as we're safe. That's always been the grandfathered in understanding that I've understood since the first chief allowed me to be a buff.
Oh, now that's a very important point. You see
Yeah.
and that's an important point. So this is the right way of doing something. And that is the fact that Andrew got approved to be a buff for the department. It's not something he just said, I am the buff of this fire department. You went through, what kind of a process did you go through to get the chief's approval?
When I was a young man, this happened. Chief Johnson was the chief. He's a retiree now, but he was the chief at the time, and he saw that I had the interest in. When I was a young man, he said if I wanted to show up at fires, as long as I stayed within the chief's. Always made contact with the chief when I got on scene, visual, just so the chief could see that I was on the scene, and stayed across the street and stayed out of the way. I was allowed to show up and buff fires. That was like in 1999, and it was an interview process at the time. The chief, I think I met him in his office. He was a member of my community. He was a member of my home church too, so I knew him pretty well. It's not like I was specially called into his office or anything, as a
Yeah.
But he did it. He just basically allowed me to do it, because I think he saw it as a community service, because it would keep this young 17, 18-year-old kid out of drugs and alcohol and out of trouble. And for the most part, that's been my story. I had a trying time as a teen, and I was involved in the fire service as a buff, and made lots of friends. And a lot of those guys have retired and gone on to other careers, and a lot of turnovers been at the department. There's a lot of young guys and gals that I don't even know, but I'm happy to show up at their fires and make history for them.
That's great. And yeah, we'll talk about, we're going to talk about the concept of the historic legacy when we come back. We're going to take a quick break here, folks. If you're watching the video, you won't see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, well, you know what will happen. We'll take a break and we'll have a couple of public service announcements. And then we'll be right back with my guest, Andrew Cunningham of Wheeling, West Virginia. We're going to continue our discussion about being a fire buff in a community. So, as always, please stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. And I am your host, Steve Green. And with me, my guest today is Andrew Cunningham. He is the founder of let me see if I get this right, the Wheeling, West Virginia Fire Buff Association.
Wheeling Fire Buffs, yes.
Fire Buffs, okay. And we've been talking about the right way and the wrong way to be a fire buff, but we're also talking about the value of fire buffs in capturing the history of the department they follow. And our guest, Andrew, has been a buff with Wheeling Fire Department for over 20 years. So you can imagine that he's seen a lot, he's learned a lot, and he's shot a lot of pictures. And we're going to talk about those uh, in this segment. Andrew, what would you say if you had to? What would be the top 5 calls that you think you've covered in those 20 years?
Well, first of all, let me reintroduce myself as a fire buff documenting the Wheeling Fire Department. I'm
Okay.
not with the fire
No,
department.
not right, right.
I don't want to
Right.
have them say that I said that.
That was my.
I doc
I was misspoken. I apologize.
Sure. I document them. That's all. It's just a civilian. But I'd say the top 5 historical calls. We've had some major 3 alarm fires in Wheeling in the 90s, 2000s, even up until recently. I can think of early arrival calls. Those were pretty significant for me. There was a major house fire with it was the first and second floor were involved in the rear. And I got there when the first engine company arrived. So I got a lot of good photos, and it was right down the street from my house where I lived. So I mean, it was like I heard the call come in over the scanner, and I walked down the street 1 block, and everybody was pulling up. That was a pretty good call, and it was a good call in terms of they rescued everybody too that was trapped.
Good.
So it was a good outcome as well. Trying to think back to, I made an early arrival call. I just happened to be in the neighborhood in East Wheeling, at 17th and Wood. It's actually just down the street from where they're building the new fire headquarters, in East Wheeling. And I was there before pre-arrival, before engine 2 or ladder 1 or anybody arrived on scene. And I got pictures of them taking the hydrant and stretching the first line and the backup line. They had a basement fire. And they and got them masking up and going in, and the only downside to that fire was, at the time it was like 2004, so I was shooting on a 1.3 megapixel camera, which is very small, so the
Right.
photos are tiny, you know. I have them on my Flickr account, but I did capture it. I can think of a buff, something in the historical archives was there was the Guerrero third alarm, the music store, and the Imperial Display music store, or not music store, the Imperial Display department store that caught fire. I did not buff those, but several other buffs in town did buff those, and I have them in my collection and digitalized them. So that's a part of the history of Wheeling, is seeing downtown Wheeling with big plumes of smoke and tower ladders
Sure.
up.
Yeah.
For the third alarm fires, they call on all extra truck companies from Ohio and other counties, because Wheeling has two truck companies, but they want to do tower ladder operations on a massive
Right.
third alarm.
It's interesting. You mentioned that. I never was in West Virginia until I moved to Ohio. And that's because I was in school in Cincinnati, but we had family. My wife's sister lived in Philly. So for all the holidays, major holidays, Jewish holidays and Thanksgiving and things like that, we would drive from Ohio east. And to get there, we'd come up through, I forget the interstate, and then we'd go through about 6 miles of the West Virginia spur, and then we were in Pennsylvania, and go the rest of the way of the state all the way east to Philly. But so I was able to say, I remember saying that because I used to keep track of all the states I had been in, and this was now 1976. So I was happy. I was talking to somebody and said, "Wow, I've just added another state to where I've been." And they said, "Where?" I said, "West Virginia." He goes, "Oh, where'd you go in West Virginia? Did you go to the mountains? Did you go to the caves? Did you go whaling?" I said, "I don't know. It was just a little strip of land between Ohio and Pennsylvania." But I was in it. I saw the sign, "Welcome to West Virginia," and now leaving West Virginia and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So it was great, and I've always wanted to go back because I love being from New England originally and not from South Florida. I've always enjoyed the picturesque aspect of mountains and rolling hills and things like that, which the biggest of those that we have in Florida is a speed bump. Basically, those are the biggest hills we have in this state. We're very flat here. So when I head back up north on vacations and stuff, it's just wonderful to be back and see just the beauty of it. And I know that the falls in West Virginia are absolutely amazing. I've seen pictures of that in various magazines. So I think that I think you're very lucky where you are. Yeah, you have some bad weather, but hey, growing up in Boston and living in Syracuse for 4 years, I know what bad snowy weather can be all about. So that I don't miss. I will have to say I don't miss that. So all right, so we've talked about a few best calls. How many people in your organization right now?
I've got, let me think. I've got five plus myself, and then we have two, at least one or two Wheeling Fire Department firefighters that advise us if we have a question or I have a question. There's at least a captain and a firefighter that I can run it by.
That's wonderful.
And they give us feedback. They're
That's the
happy to
profession.
advise us.
That's being a professional. In my book, the fact that not only the department, but that the department is working with you. They know what you do. They appreciate what your Buff Club is doing, and they have these two people that you can use. I think that's an amazing relationship that you have with your organization to the fire department. A lot of larger fire departments might not even do that for the buff groups in that area. But I think it's a very smart way, because the more information you have, the safer both sides are going to be,
That's right.
and
And
the less trouble the fire department will have, because they know they can trust you and your
yeah,
team members, because you're learning directly from them, not making the decisions on your own.
right. Like I've had to go through growing pains, myself and with my organization, making mistakes, like tweeting calls that didn't need to be tweeted, like with addresses and things that the fire department necessarily didn't want to have on Twitter. And nothing recently, but just like in years past, like if a fire truck got in an accident or something, when I was a young kid, I might post like might have posted a tweet about that, and they, we don't, that somebody pulled me aside and said, we don't need to have that on Twitter. And I learned, and I kind of developed a kind of an idea, a core of like a standard that I know it's in my head. I try to preach it to my buff staff members, but ultimately all decisions go through me. I'm the one that runs all the social media and make all the final decisions in posting things. But I know what the fire department doesn't want. It doesn't want any photos of it represented in a bad light.
Sure.
And I worked very hard to capture images that show them working in a good light, like they are, because we have a fantastic fire department, and the men and the women, they not only are they brave in terms of what they do in their career, but integrity. They're ethical and this is evident in their community relations with buffs and other people in their neighborhood. They each fire station's a safe space, and if kids in the neighborhood stop by, and in the summertime the doors are up, the guys are out smoking cigars on the bay of the firehouse. The kids come up and they pass the football with them, and it's a neighborhood fire department. Each there's 7 stations in our city, and each station lives it's in a community, and the firefighters are a big part of that community. And I
Yeah.
owe it to them to capture them in the best light. And
That's shows what a stand-up person you and your colleagues are, because you've learned, you made some mistakes, you've learned about them, you've grown from them, and you're dedicated with the right ethos behind you. We're not here to capture somebody screwing up. We're here to capture the men and women at their best moments.
that's right.
And I think if there were more people who thought along, who take pictures of fires or videos, and they thought along those lines, that I want to capture what's happening and what will make the fire department look best under these very trying circumstances, then I think we'd have a lot more great pictures and photos on sites and on social media that people can enjoy without, believe me, I've seen videos and pictures that just turn my stomach. And I don't mean because it's gross. Believe me, 8 years on fire and EMS. Yeah, I've seen just about everything as gross as you can find. But it's how we handle it. And when I was visiting stations, I made sure never to be in the way. Nobody ever told me, but I always made sure I parked my bike on the side of the firehouse. I didn't want to be anywhere on the front, on the apron at all. So I always parked my bike there. And then once I became a firefighter, and I had to travel for my work sometimes, it was nice that I could go to any firehouse, and I can't remember ever having a problem in any state that I visited where I told them I was a firefighter, and I was warmly welcomed in. I would always offer to, they said, "You want to have lunch?" I said, "Only if I can buy in," because I didn't want to, I didn't want them to use their money to have me join them in a meal. I thought it was wonderful to invite me, but I was going to ask them to pay for it. And then there were a couple of times where, in those early days, where I was visiting a department and they got an alarm and they said, "Hey, grab a coat and hat off the hook, come ride with us." And one of those was New York City, because I was down there. My work sent me down there for a conference. The first day was fair. I came up with one way, but the next day, the agenda I just knew wasn't going to have anything to do with what I was looking for, what I needed for my organization. And took a walk out of the hotel and happened to bump into a fire station that was only a block away, and rang the bell and showed them my badge, came in and invited me in, and they wanted to know what it was like where I was. And at that time I was working in upstate central New York. And then the bell rang, and it had a rescue company there and said, "Come on, grab a hat and go, let's go. Come with us." And it wasn't a big call, but the thrill of riding with an FDNY rescue was one of the best things in my fire career that I'll always remember. And I think that's something that firefighters have a lot of memories. We have the good memories, and we have some not so good memories. But I think that some of the people that I met as a firefighter who were, I don't know if they were buffs at that time, we didn't really talk about it, but they were taking pictures at calls we were on. Their heart wasn't in it. They were there to take a picture, but I couldn't, in talking with them, I couldn't determine the real reason why they took it. They didn't classify themselves as a buff. There were 3 times. Didn't classify themselves as a buff. They weren't sure if they were going to sell the picture or not. Didn't make any difference to me. I was just a firefighter. I wasn't an officer or anything like that. I wasn't going to tell them what to do, but I was just interested what the pictures were for. And I think they all came away with I just like them. Okay. Yeah, but a lot of the ones we like, we can see in the newspaper and in online and stuff like that. So I think there's another reason. But from what you're telling me, the Wheeling Fire Buff Group really is an organization that, using their hands in a different way, is helping the Wheeling Fire Department.
We're trying to.
Exactly. You're not pulling hose. You're not raising ladders. You're taking pictures of these professional men and women dedicated to their craft, helping your city.
That's right.
That's what it's about. And that seems to be everything you've told us today, and what you and I have talked about prior to the interview, is that everything is that you do is not only just to keep you guys entertained because you share this passion, but you're doing it so that whatever you publicize will hold the Wheeling Fire Department in the best eyes of the community.
That's right.
And I think every buff group that's out there needs to remember that. Your job isn't to make headlines. If you're a buff, your job is to grab some of the best pictures that tell the story of what those men and women are doing. You stay safe. You let them be as safe as they can be. You don't interfere, but you still enjoy the experience.
That's right.
Right?
Right. And hopefully it'll, in time, definitely in time, it'll turn into history. And then 100 years from now, we'll have, the 2000s and the 90s and the 80s covered in photos, and all the people that are alive then. Of course, 100 years from now, we won't be here, but they'll be able to look back on our lives and the work of the men and women of the Wheeling Fire Department during this time, and see the good things, and see everything. It'll come to life to them.
Just before we went on the break, I wrote down on my notepad here the historic legacy that this leaves, and you just said it, because there are all different forms of. We have, in the old days, my old days, we had cameras that worked on regular film. You have to put a roll of film in the camera, roll it forward, take pictures, push it ahead to the next frame to expose it. And then we got to video and VHS and beta. And beta went down the tubes. And but we've always found a way to keep track of history. Today, we can go to museums and see documents from the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. If you're a fan of the Secret of Oak Island on the History Channel, that they've found items on Oak Island, Nova Scotia, going back to the 1600s. So there'll be a time in the future when those of us who are here now are gone, and there'll be different ways of looking at photos and videos, but they will have the history that we've left for them to look at, because firefighting will probably way, way different than how they do it and what they do, and the equipment will be different. But the fact is that there will always be people, I think, who want to be fire buffs, because they love to be there when it happens and give at least moral support to the men and women who risk their lives every day.
That's right. Definitely.
So if somebody wants to organize a buff group, what is your suggestion?
Well,
suggestions in plural.
Suggestions. I think you need more than one person, obviously, to be a group, but like the one person can start like a Facebook group. That's I mean, Facebook's one social media platform. There's like Discord um communities too. And the older people, and I'm 42, so I consider myself older. I don't even understand Discord sometimes. It's kind of a tool that the younger kids do, but there's ways to set those things up to have basically a platform for communication between group members. That's key. Wheeling fire buffs, our main buffs, and our advisors, our fire department advisors, were in a private messenger chat, and it's just the photographers that communicate. And then I communicate with my co-founder Jordan, also privately, um, just to kind of we like when we hear calls, like he lives in the southern part of the county, and I live kind of more north. He can hear fire whistles in other counties and stuff, and he'll say he can hear whistles going off, and then I'll monitor. I'll jump on the broadcastify and monitor the county fires if we're gonna buff volunteers and buff other counties, and start determining whether we want to start reporting that there's a fire, and who's going to go, and what buff is going to get what. But in terms of wheeling, we communication over messenger, and then like a home group page where we can share our photos. That's a good idea for starting to be a buff group. Another real good idea, and something that I utilize a lot, is YouTube. Because YouTube, you can literally be a responding, like an apparatus buff that captures responses. It's a lot less dangerous than going on the scene and capturing the fire. There's a ton of buffs that do it, and there's a ton of buffs on YouTube that have multiple, hundreds of thousands of subscribers following them, and it kind of becomes, that YouTube page kind of becomes a buff group in itself, because if you can
Right.
post every day and capture, then you have the comments, and then you can really go to town. My favorite buff, and I'll shout his name out, Aaron Mott. That's AARONMOTT. He's on YouTube. He's in my opinion the best example of a professional buff that films big city fire departments. He filmed Philadelphia. He does Philadelphia a lot, and Baltimore, a lot of Baltimore, DC, and then like counties, and like county departments in between those metro areas. And my favorite thing about Aaron is he's a lot similar to me. He just uploads the raw photo or the raw video onto YouTube, and puts a description of the company, sometimes the specs of the truck, and buff stuff, and stuff that buffs and firefighters will find useful. And he has almost 100,000 subscribers. He never talks on his videos. That's a big no-no in my opinion. There's a buff in DC that there's a video that he has, and he's literally screaming at the fire truck because he's so excited to have it come by. But he's like screaming and like hollering, and like it's like it's I don't know. It turns my stomach, because that's not the point of a buff. You're not supposed to scream at the fire truck. You're not supposed to talk. Just film the raw video.
Sure.
I do edit videos a little bit on YouTube and add music, and sometimes that can be controversial if the music's like, if the person doesn't like the song. But music's music, and um, I'm not really worried about opinions like that. But I
Right.
try to have fun with it. But that's just like a fun channel. Music videos with firefighters. That's just something that you would watch if you are a firefighter, or like a firefighter wife or husband of a firefighter, and you want to kind of see fire trucks and music. But the raw buff stuff, I think I don't think buffs should talk unless they're given an important size up. Like I've seen New York buffs on YouTube. This guy's name, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's the Magisterium one. He's a major buff in New York, and he talks on his videos, but he does it like he'll like a size up. He'll get there and he'll say like we got a 1077 in a high rise, and gives the size ups, and then he'll if he has to like move locations, he'll comment a little bit, but it's kind of like it's respectful. It's not disrespectful screaming at the fire trucks and making yourself look silly. But I think for a buff group, having a Facebook page or a YouTube channel, something that you can get your media out there and get people to see what you're doing. And then it picks up interest. That's basically what happened in my group. I started out by, I had MySpace. That takes back to how old
Oh, wow,
it was when that happened.
I remember
I had
that.
MySpace and YouTube. And Jordan, my co-founder, approached me in 2014 and said, "Would you like some help?" And I'm a buff, and would you want to start a Facebook page? And we just kind of started together, and we picked up a couple other buffs, Evan and Billy and Devin. And those guys are Billy makes scenes in North Wheeling. He's kind of limited. He doesn't drive, but he gets the main throughway. He gets Rescue One and all the companies going north out of the county on the main route. He gets good video of that. And Evan lives in the center city, and he gets everything downtown. He shows up on scene with his scooter, and he's very accomplished photographer. And his father is has passed away, but his father was a paramedic and firefighter for Wheeling Fire Department too. And so he's got it in his blood too.
Oh, sure.
Evan does.
Sure. Well, you know what? It's great to hear that. First of all, in my mind, I think having a close, tight-knit group is part of the recipe for success. Because if you have too many people and there's no organization, they just belong, let's say, to the organization, but there's no organization of how the members work, then I think that helter-skelter approach would never really generate a strong success. Whereas the way you guys are doing it seems much more orderly, and that everybody works from the same page. And I think that's how any organization of volunteers work, is they create an organization in a way that the organization will work together for the best results. And I think that your group, from what you've told us today, really, you have that organization. You have people who know, you have you have open lines of communication with each other. You have a wonderful, and I don't know how prevalent this is, but you have a great relationship with the Wheeling Fire Department, especially if you have two people, a captain and a firefighter, who are advisors, act as advisors for you guys. And you welcome them with open arms, as opposed to saying, no, don't tell us what to do. We know what we want to do. No, you guys want to work with them. And again, that to me is a sign of professionalism in a group. Professionalism doesn't mean you're being paid to do something. It just means you do your job well, whether you're a volunteer or you're a paid person, whatever. Many of us volunteer in churches and synagogues. We don't get paid for it, but we do it to help the organization. This is true in nonprofit organizations around the country, that many of the people who make up the real base of those organizations do it as volunteers and do it out of their caring for the cause and to help the community in general. And what you've explained today is exactly the same thing, that you work with the Wheeling Fire Department because you want to make sure that you're okay with them and they're okay with you, that you're following their rules. You want your people to make sure you're following the organizational standards. And now Wheeling knows that they can trust the people in your group because you work through them to make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is the bottom line for any buff group. If you don't connect yourself, not just by taking pictures or videos, if you don't personally connect yourself to the department and have their understanding and backing and learn what they want and what they don't want and what you can do and you can't do, then you could probably have a very successful buffing organization with knowing that that department that you're covering, if it's just one, for example, like Andrew's doing, that they're happy to know you're there making history for them and your community, but you're not there to interfere or think that you're out there with any other purpose other than recording the history of the community and in its fire department. And I think that if every group can say that is our basis, is to promote our community and the men and women who protect it, then you probably stand a chance of being a good buff group. And that, I think, is primary. And you guys have done it. I mean, everything you've told us today really shows that you went through the growing pains, you reached out, which I think is, when you first mentioned it, really is amazing that you took the initiative to reach out to the fire department to make sure what you were doing was okay with them and that you're doing it right for them. So I want to also before I forget, we're going to give you some listings here. We'll be in the show notes also, but Andrew has mentioned their Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Wheeling's Bravest, WHEELINGS Bravest, no apostrophe, just Wheeling's Bravest. So facebook.com/Wheeling's Bravest. They have their website, www.whgfirebuffs.com. I'm just pausing because I'm trying to read my own handwriting. On YouTube, they're at youtube.com/Wheeling Firebuffs. They have photos on Flickr. On Flickr, it's flickr.com/photos/1976-35805. The @ meaning the capital 2 on your keyboard, then an uppercase N like in November, 08. And that'll be in the show notes again. And I really recommend that you go and visit some of these sites of the Wheeling Firebuffs. Andrew has really shared with us stuff that's new for this podcast. Here we are towards the end of the 7th season. We've never covered the idea of fire buffs before. We've talked about citizens getting in the way at times in the fire service, or trying to help when their help wasn't needed, although it was certainly appreciated they wanted to. But again, remember, folks, that a fire scene is not a playground. Not a playground for the firefighters and who are wearing all this gear, have all these tools, and it's definitely not a playground for a citizen, a standard citizen. That's what it's about. You can't interfere. You have to be willing to keep a safe distance and still work hard to capture the photos and videos you want to. Nobody has any negative to say that, unless for any reason the department doesn't like that. But as long as you're upfront and you're true to it, I think you guys can be anybody out there can be just as successful as Andrew and his group are, because they follow the rules, they do it the right way, and the fire department says, hey, we'll provide you with advisors. So if you have questions about something, you can check it out and be sure to be doing the right thing as opposed to doing the wrong thing, which could, depending on the seriousness of it, could fracture the relationship. And you don't want to do that if you're a buffing group. You want to keep that relationship strong and positive at all the times. And everything that Andrew has told us says that that's what he and his group do. They follow the rules and they still do what they love doing, which is getting pictures and videos of the Wheeling, West Virginia Fire Department. And it's a great hobby. It keeps you busy, depending on your community. And even if it's only occasionally here and there, you just might be the one to grab that one shot on a here and there situation that is key to that incident. And I'm sure that may have happened with your group at some point, right? Haven't there be pictures that they really liked?
I gotta give credit to the best shot I've seen by a buff, and it wasn't by a buff; it was by a firefighter who was off duty at the time. He's a captain now, Captain Jason Milton, and he filmed a lieutenant who bailed out of a window onto a porch roof, and he got him he snapped a photo at the moment that all the rescue guys were with their R1 on their helmet were surrounding him, and he was like pulled up, and you could see like blood where he dove out, and it was just a perfect photo. And I got to give Jason credit, Captain Milton credit. He was filming photos that day. That was way back in before he was a captain. He was off duty and at the fire, and I missed that fire, but I've never got a firefighter bailout. I was always told that was the best kind of history to get for the fire service, to get a firefighter bailout.
And they're hard to get because you got to be at the right place at that right, not moment, but right that second. You have to be at the right place to grab
That's right.
it, because it's not predicted. We read smoke all the time when we go on a call. Gray smoke, dark black smoke. Is the smoke flowing? Is the structure puffing the smoke, which could mean there's going to be a backdraft or smoke explosion. You don't know about when this something like a bailout is going to occur. And I guess for this now captain, he was at the right place at the right time and got. And if Andrew says it's one of the best pictures for a buff he's ever seen, then that says a lot for that picture.
Yeah, he's a good photographer too. He's a good guy.
Right. So, if you're looking for more information, I would suggest you visit their website, www.whg. So it's Whiskey Hotel Golf Fire Buffs. Okay, Whiskey Hotel Golf Firebuffs.com. Visit their website. And I'm sure there's a contact information on the website, right? If they want to reach you.
There's a contact social. We have a social email address that you can email us at.
Okay.
On the website.
Good.
I don't know it offhand, but it's on the website.
All right, that's all right. But the fact is that I'm sure Andrew and his colleagues would be happy to help and give you advice, or if you want somebody else's other opinion on a picture, share it. Let them ask them what they think of it. Maybe you're new and you're not quite sure how to frame the picture or how to get it. Visit their website. Ask them. I have no doubt, after talking with Andrew and I have been talking about 3 months now. We finally were able to find a date. I was under the weather. He was under the weather. So we finally were able to put a date together. But I have no doubt from what he's told me in our conversations and emails and in today's episode that they would be happy to help you and or your group, give you some suggestions, some advice, and so that you and your community can be as successful as they are in Wheeling. And Wheeling isn't a huge city. It's not a tiny city. It's one of those middling-sized cities. And they're busy. Why? because they got people living there. And wherever people live, fire department is going to be busy.
That's right.
And you just want to be there in the right place at the right time to catch it, if this is what your interest is. And Andrew, I really want to thank you for reaching out to me, because you can't, I'm not sure even how you found me. I don't remember at the moment, but the fact that you reached out to me and said, this is who I am, this is what I do, would you be interested? And I think I answered it right away. Yep. Because we haven't done it before. We had never done it. And now I begrudge the fact that I didn't have the forethought to think about doing this topic. I've known about buff since I was a kid, but I never knew that a buffing group would be interested to come on the show and talk about what they do. And we also, as Andrew mentioned correctly, some of our other cities, some of the bigger cities in the community have volunteer support groups. As he mentioned, in the Philadelphia, the great city of Philadelphia, where I've visited almost every station in that city, spoken to several officers, got to visit way back when the new communication was built. I got to visit and have a personal tour through that city. And Philadelphia Fire Department is actually an inspiration to us at our former company, Dalmatian Productions. We're still looking at trying to sell a limited series TV dramatic series about real stories from the fire service on TV, not make-believe Hollywood stories. But the Philadelphia Fire Department has a great group called Second Alarmers. They've been supporting the Philadelphia Fire Department for a century. That's a long-ass time, ladies and gentlemen, to have a great group and like that. And they are out with Philadelphia firefighters, rain or shine, snow, ice, sleet, whatever it is, they're out there helping the firefighters, whatever they can do. There are a lot of these groups in the state of Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Maryland, Delaware. We don't see them really down here that much, where I am in Southeast Florida. But I'm sure in many other communities, you're going to be able to find either support groups that you can be a volunteer for, or if you like taking pictures and videos, that you can be a buff with. And just do your research. And thankfully, you can do so much of this research online for free and find out what's in your community, if there is a buffing group that follows your community. And, feel free to reach out to Andrew and his group for advice, for ideas, for thoughts, camera information, etc., because they're well experienced. I don't know what cameras they use, so please don't write to me asking me, what camera does he use for those shots? I have no idea, but I'll bet that if you drop them a line, they'll be happy to answer that question for you. If you're looking to organize, we've talked a little bit about it, but I'll bet Andrew would be happy to provide you with some guidelines of how he organized his group and what you can or should do for a successful group. And that's one of the things, that's most important. One of the things we stress here is constant learning. To be a successful firefighter, you have to always be willing to continue to learn. You can never be satisfied with where you are at this moment. There's something else to be learned every single day. And to be a fire buff, you kind of have to make that same dedication. You have to dedicate yourself to be the best that you can be. And whether it's getting new equipment by talking with other people or learning how to edit a photo a little bit better, that's what it's all about. You may not be getting paid to be a buff, but what you're being paid in is the satisfaction you get by shooting some great pictures or video and getting it posted on the group site, because then you have that photos are open to the world. Listen, here at this podcast, when we started in 2016, I was going to be happy if I had 10 firefighters listening to the show. Now, for over 3 years now, we've been in 40 countries, over 6 continents. I don't even know how people are able to listen to us in some of the places that they hear our podcast or watch them, but I am thrilled that we have that type of an audience. So no matter where you are listening to this episode, you may have buffs in your country and in your city or in your community. You may not. They may be support groups. They may not. But look, if you like the fire service and really care about the men and women who protect your community, and you want to kind of put those photos, videos down for posterity for your community and that department, then talk with them. Reach out to them and find out what they like, what they don't like, and what you can do, what you can't do. Because it's always better to ask first rather than have to answer for what you did before you knew the right way. That's a life lesson that I've learned multiple times myself. So I want to thank our guest today, Andrew Cunningham. Both of us had a little difficulty finding that good date that would hold for us both. And he was very patient. I want to be patient because I really wanted him to be on the show. We've never done a show about it before. And I think you have made the show really worthwhile. You've opened up our viewers and listeners to, I think, something that a lot of them don't know about. And if they do, they may have seen a picture here or there, but they don't know what a buff group is. And I think you've shared that with them, and I appreciate that very, very much. And I want to thank you for reaching out to me to put
Thanks,
this
Steve.
together.
I want to say that the biggest payment that I get when I take a photo is when a firefighter says, "Hey, thanks for taking that photo. I really appreciate that." And I've gotten that a number of times from the Wheeling firemen and other firemen in local departments.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I've, for some reason, the good Lord has steered my path to be the first or second person arriving on the scene of an emergency before anybody else does. And I've always carried, even after I was disabled, I always carry a full BLS package in my vehicle, safety ropes, gloves, etc. And I've been there, and as you said, in the same vein, the greatest thanks I get is when the person who was hurt or injured says thank you, and the rescue team or the firefighters who show up and say, hey, thanks for, I give them the vitals and stuff like that. They say thanks for being here and thanks for stopping to help out. That's worth $1 gazillion to me, because it's, even it, as old as I am with my health infirmities, I can't drive by an emergency. And it's just something that happens. And I happen to be, like I said, it must be the good Lord who just puts me in the right place at the right time. And I help, because that's what I learned to do as a firefighter, is you learn to help other people. And I think that being a buff, I think it helps the whole department that you follow, because the public sees them in the true light. They don't see them sitting in front of the apparatus on a summer's day smoking the cigars. They see them risking their lives to save people they don't even know, but they're willing to risk their lives to do it. And that's the story that you and your colleagues tell. The Wheeling, West Virginia, the brave men and women of the Wheeling, West Virginia Fire Department. So thank you for your dedication to the fire service with what you contribute, because you can't get any better PR than seeing scenes of what you're doing to help others make the public rounds, that other people can see the great job that a department is doing. And I think that any department would be proud to have dedicated individuals like Andrew and his fire buffs with Wheeling, because they're always looking out for number one, which is they want to put that fire department in the best light possible and share their exploits with the public. And you can't do anything more for a department that you care about than promote how good they are in your community and outside, to now that everything we post is worldwide, basically, this podcast and what the photos that you guys do and all the platforms that you have, you're just putting the Wheeling, West Virginia Fire Department in a great light and showing what these brave men and women do. And there's no better support than that. So on behalf of me as a firefighter, and I'm sure from what you've told me from your relationship with them, they are as proud of you as I am for your dedication to the fire service.
Thanks, Steve.
It means a lot. It really does. So folks, if you're watching the video, this will be the end of what you'll be seeing. If you're listening to the audio, well, you know what's going to happen. We'll do a few words and then we'll be back with a little bit more of 5 Alarm Task Force. To my friend, Andrew Cunningham, thank you once again. Stay safe and stay well. And to our viewers, we'll be back next week. Coming up still, we have Battalion Chief Johnston is going to be joining us again. And Captain Mike Daly is going to be joining us again. We have Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez from the University of Miami, Sylvester Comprehensive Center Firefighter Cancer Initiative Program will be joining us in June. So we have some great podcasts still coming up in season 7. What's going to happen with season 8? I'm not sure yet. Can't give you a prediction yet because a lot of it depends on my health, and we're still looking into that as well. But thank you for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate it. As always, please stay safe and stay well, and make sure to take care of each other and yourself. Bye-bye now.